I first traveled to Cuba back in 1986. And I think it's fair to say that, about 15 minutes after landing at the airport, I fell in love with the country. It's probably my only addiction. And I have been to Cuba over 90 times by now. I have studied the criminal justice system and the prison system extensively as a law professor. And I was struck by how radically different those systems are and how they are framed to support the revolution and to support the people. It took me quite a while to understand the difference because I kept trying to draw analogies to the US system. So I would say after maybe 10 visits, I finally got it out of my blood that you just couldn't draw those analogies because what Cuba was building was something that was unique and building a better world for all people. And as I would hear President Fidel Castro say, a better world is possible, I finally started to get the depth and the breadth of what those words meant. And as I would travel all around the country, I was amazed. It was the first time in my life that I actually thought I understood what it meant to be free, that it was safe to walk around. I didn't have to worry about anybody, whether they wore a uniform or not, to disturb my peace just because of the color of my skin. It was a very different experience than my lifetime in the United States. But I continued to wonder where the police were hiding in Cuba because I didn't see any arrests. I would see the police seeming to have conversations with lay people. It appeared to me they were talking about maybe a baseball game or maybe about the weather or maybe even the traffic. But I didn't see what I was used to as an arrest in the United States, which was physical brutality, people being thrown on the ground, people being thrown against walls, humiliated, called all kinds of nasty names. I kept wondering where those police were, where did those experiences happen, and how come the police didn't arrest anybody? So in my convoluted U.S. Indoctrination, I started to think, well, maybe the police didn't do the arrest, maybe the military did the arrest, but then where were they hiding? Because I still hadn't seen any arrests. So finally, I um, gathered the courage to ask some of my Cuban friends who I thought wouldn't laugh me out of the country, like, how come the police don't arrest anybody? And they said, oh, Sophie, what are you talking about? The police arrest people. Well, why would you think the police don't arrest people? And I said, well, I've been here a lot now and I've gone all around the country and I haven't seen any arrests. So they said, okay, we're going to go out with you the next day. We'll walk around Havana. And then they were pointing out, see, it's right over there. That's an arrest. And that was those conversations that to me looked like there was a discussion about a baseball game. But there was no violence. There was no tension. There was no physical or verbal confrontation. And I just couldn't wrap my brain around the possibility that there could be an arrest minus those things, that there could be respect coming from law enforcement. That was foreign concept in the United States. Well, it was a foreign concept in my section of the United States. When I was teaching at Harvard Law School, and most of the students I was teaching were children of the oppressor, as I would say, well-meaning, but still children of the oppressor, I realized that they had a very different experience with the police. Even if they were stopped, it was that friendly kind of baseball-looking encounter that I'd seen in Cuba. But that wasn't the experience in my community in the United States. So it highlighted further something that I knew for decades, long before I became a criminal defense lawyer, that there's two very, very different systems of so-called justice in the United States. One is spelled Justice, and the other is spelled Just-US. And so it was that latter one that I was very familiar with. And I was relieved to find that part of the accomplishments and triumphs of the Cuban Revolution was that all of its citizens could enjoy the first spelling of the word justice. And that was very clearly rooted in what the ambassador mentioned and Professor August mentioned, which is that the people are at the center of the entire country. Even the criminal justice system and the prison system are all designed to enable people to improve and return back to their communities as quickly as possible so they can be contributing members of society. That there's no economic benefit, there's no financial gain from locking up what the Cubans recognize as their most valuable natural resource, which is its people. Unlike in the United States, where there's a whole economy built around putting people in cages. So as I started to draw those distinctions, I was mesmerized by the various programs that Cuba kept implementing that would provide people with ways to get out of prison sooner. And every time I would go back for another visit to Cuba, thinking that I had mastered an understanding of the program that I had learned about in my previous trip, and then I would try to show off my knowledge, I would talk to my Cuban friends and other professors, and they would say, oh, no, we've moved past that, Sophie. Now we're doing this, which was even more mind boggling and even more progressive and even more people centered than before. So as I learned more and more, I started infusing those different ideas into my teaching to my students. So I learned, and I'm very, very clear about now, we can't build a better world in the US until we are able to take off the blinders, until we're able to appreciate, and to the point that Kimberly was making earlier, till we recognize the frightening ignorance and arrogance that we're infused with in the United States, where we fail to understand that there are other places that are doing a much better job, and that there's a lot that we could learn from studying those other places. You know, from time to time, I speak at different prisons and I share with the people who are incarcerated some of the experiences and programs that Cuba has instituted that are so much more people centered. Things like
Excuse me,
allowing
Sophia.
people,
I
two
just have
minutes?
two
Oh,
minutes.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
Things like allowing people to go out on furloughs, things like determining the security level of someone's incarceration by how many weekends a month they can go home to their family. It's like unheard of in the United States. But when you think about those things, that is how people continue to feel connected to their communities and how they can come back to their communities as whole people and not stigmatized and not destroyed. I'd like to say to my fellow activists in the United States that we have to change our language in many ways. And one of the things that we have to change is this concept of criminal justice reform and prison reform. These systems are so geared towards destroying people. And it's not just the police, it is the vigilante police, it's the KKK, it's those people who took over the Capitol on January 6th. They're all in cahoots together. So we can't reform these systems. They're beyond reform. They're no more able to be reformed than slavery. And we have to be vigilant in our determination to completely overhaul them. It's not about reform, and build a society that centers its people as the most valuable asset that this country has to offer. Thank you.